Right, 7 p.m. Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of Burnside Council on the 11th of May 2021, opening at 7 o'clock. We are still seated according to COVID restrictions in the chamber, but you are welcome to join us in the foyer, and the public question time has been reinstated. We acknowledge that the land... please stand for the acknowledgements. We acknowledge that the land we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the original custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important to the Kaurna people today. We also pay respect to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting and attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to those who have sacrificed their lives for this country and its people. We seek understanding and guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all who reside, study, work in or visit the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Please be seated. In case of an emergency, an alarm will sound and then please follow the directions of the staff. I remind you that council meetings are live streamed through the council's website and a copy of the agenda is available by downloading from this website. Members, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak and to use your microphones when speaking. Ask everyone here to turn off your mobile phones and place them on silent during the meeting, and a reminder about the 3-minute speaking time and only one question at a time. To everyone present in the chamber, please be respectful of each other and their opinions during these debates and not interrupt the person debating or talk while they're speaking. Thank you. We move to apologies. I have an apology from Councillor Henschke. There are no leave of absences. Declaration of interest. There are two I'm aware of. Councillor Piggott.
Yes, could I declare a perceived conflict of interest on item 11.1 on the basis my wife is a member of the Senior Manager of Pembroke School?
Thank you. And Councillor Carbone?
Thank you, Worship. Also a perceived conflict of interest regarding item 11.5 and I won't be present in the chamber for that item.
Thank you, Councillor Carbone. Yes, you did.
Sorry, Mayor, I omitted to mention that I would leave the room for 11.1.
Sorry about that. I assumed you would. You always have done in the past.
Yes.
So my apologies for not picking you up. All right, confirmation of minutes. I need a mover.
I can make it.
Sorry, what was that, Councillor Davis?
I'll revert back to you.
Pardon?
I'll revert back to you.
Right, so you don't wish to speak now? No. Right. Minutes. Councillor Dawes, you're moving. Seconded by? Councillor Turnbull. All in favour? Carried. Not aware of any questions for public question time. No presentations or deputations or petitions. So I'll run through these reports. First one is Pembroke School. Councillor Davey. Laurel Avenue Community Garden name, Councillor Jones. Bluestone Curbing, Councillor Hughes. Regional subsidiaries, Councillor Turnbull. Review of items held in confidence. No one? All right, then I will ask someone to move. Councillor Lemon.
Correct, hold on. I do have a conflict. Yes. Is it a perceived conflict? Or do I have a material conflict? What? I'll just leave.
I think James needs to leave.
Just in case.
On this item?
I'm so
Sorry, are we voting on it? So I'm
Yes.
moving the motion.
Yeah, hang on a minute. I think Councillor Turnbull, you might need to also leave during this one. No, not this one. You might need to declare a conflict as well. No? No. I've been advised no. All right, thank you. I should take notice only of the CEO and not other councillors telling me what to do. Okay, now I'll go back to Councillor Lemon, who is moving the motion.
Yes, thank you.
Right, and a seconder, Councillor Piggott. All those in favour? Against? Carried. All right, the next one, we'll just wait for the other 2 or 3 to come back. All right, Councillor Davey, you wish to? I probably should have allowed the other 2 to sit down before I allowed you to jump in, Councillor Davey. East Waste Management? Is there anyone who wishes to? Okay, then Councillor Cornish is moving, Councillor Davis seconding. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Minutes of the Recruitment Committee? Councillor Hughes moving, Councillor Dawes seconding. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Mayor's Activity Report? Councillor Davis moving and seconded by Councillor Cornish. All those in favour? Carried. We don't need to go over there yet. All right, so I should go back to Councillor Davey, 11.1, and I'll just wait a few moments for Councillor Piggott to leave the room.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council receive and note the report, noting that there are no further actions required at this point, with the exception of the following. Continue to monitor the usage and effectiveness of all kiss and drop zones surrounding the school precinct. Perhaps I should add the Pembroke School Precinct. 1.2, request SAPOL to continue monitoring vehicle speeds within the school zones during the peak student movement times. 1.3, continue ongoing discussions with the City of Norwood, Payneham and St Peters with respect to installing an additional kiss and drop zone on the western side and curb ramps on Shipsters Road. And 1.4, extend the times of the loading zone in front of 8 Shipsters Road. This is a fairly comprehensive review of all the work that's been going on for the last 18 months in terms of working out how to safely transport students and ensure that the residential amenity of the area around Pembroke. So it's a finely balanced area, and it's taken our staff a lot of time. They've done a lot of work over the years to work with the local residents who are affected, the school, and Norwood, Payneham and St Peters. So it's a really multifactorial effort. Not all the residents are still happy, particularly those in Oval Terrace who feel the brunt of the traffic in the morning drop-off and the afternoon pick-up times. But as long as the area is being monitored and the traffic is being watched and we're keeping an eye on it, and that we can have the police to monitor vehicle speeds, I think we'll have to live with what we've got for the time being. It would be good if we can encourage drop-off in Park Road in Kensington Park instead of vehicles going down Oval Terrace, to actually drop the students at the gate. If they're dropped on Park Road in that wonderful area that we've put in, they can actually just walk up Oval Terrace. It's only 100 metres or so, and they can get a bit of exercise on the way. So hopefully you'll support this, and I thank the staff for all their work on it. Thank you.
Seconder, Councillor Hughes? Right, is there anyone who wishes to speak on this matter? If there is no one, then I will go back to Councillor Davey. Right, then I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Right, the Laurel Avenue Community Garden name, Councillor Jones. Right, Councillor Jones, over to you now.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move the officer's recommendation. I won't speak for long. I'm delighted that the officers have recommended this dual naming. We've had the involvement of the traditional owners who have proposed the name Laurel Avenue Perkurna Wirra. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. And I think that's a good name. And I'm also delighted that the officers are recommending that we jointly name the Peter Bennett Organic Community Garden. The late Mr. Bennett lived and worked in Burnside for many decades, running his organic gardening centre. He was a worldwide authority on organic gardening and gave advice to lots of Adelaide residents and indeed to Indigenous people out in the bush on organic gardening and producing vegetables for consumption. You know, it's something you could grow yourself rather than pay exorbitant prices for vegetables trucked in. He wrote a very famous book, which my assistant here will... If anybody wants to have a read or a borrow, well, you know, this is the 7th edition. I unfortunately don't have an autographed first edition, but it's a great read. I commend it to you. Did I mention he was Burnside Citizen of the Year in 2007? And interestingly, we're having our initial setup meeting of the Laurel Avenue Garden, and we had some people from the Chapel Street Garden in McGill come along to our meeting, and that's an organic garden as well, and they were absolutely delighted at the idea the garden would be named after Peter Bennett. So that's all I have to say, really. I just hope you'll support the motion.
Councillor Hubel, you're seconding.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, very quickly echoing Councillor Jones's comments. Very pleased with the recommendation. Look, I think the dual naming is right and appropriate, and I think Peter Bennett's name, I think what he stood for and what he advocated is an example to us all. So I hope this gets through. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I think this is a fabulous idea. I thank the staff for their report and all the work they've done on this to get this up off the ground. And I think this is the icing on the cake, so I think we've got to a really good stage. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
I think that it should actually be named the Hubel Jones Community Garden. And I don't say that as a joke, I absolutely should. If that was the motion, I would vote for it. And I'd actually prefer to see that happen. But I suspect that I don't think I'd have the numbers to do it, so I won't. But in my view, that would be a better name. Yeah, but Hubel Jones sounds so much better. And like, in all seriousness, I think that it should be, because they're the ones who got it over the line. They're the ones who spoke with the residents. They're the one who moved the motion, and it wouldn't have happened without them. So if it was going to be called anything, I think it should be called the Hubel Jones. I'll vote for it, but please stop laughing. It's a serious motion. Like, that's what I'd like to do. But I think it is a shame that we can't. I think there's a perception that it would be incorrect, but I think that would be a better name for it than Peter Bennett. Yeah, we could put a plaque in.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Or a small statue.
Can I just ask a question through the CEO? I mentioned yesterday about the need to have the Laurel Avenue words as well as Perkurna Wirra and Peter Bennett. Did you get a resolution on that?
Yes, we certainly did through Madam Mayor. That is the wishes of the Ghana. Okay. That the Laurel Avenue is in the start of the word.
That's okay. I just wondered about the necessity to have 3 names, but our CEO did say he was going to check, so that's fine. I'd also just take the opportunity, if you haven't been up to the Chapel Street McGill garden, it is absolutely stunning. And some of us were on council when it was begun, or when we developed the land, and they cannot speak highly enough the people who run that garden, and I went on a Saturday morning when it was an open day, and they could not speak highly enough of our staff and the support that the staff have given them over the years since that garden has been established, that community garden. So I just wanted to make a point about that, and please, Alan, pass it on to your staff. That has been, that they really, a number of people I spoke to that morning said how wonderful our staff are in terms of supporting that community garden, and I'm sure that the same thing will happen with this one when it is opened and named accordingly. So thank you for that. Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I'd just like to also reiterate, great with the naming, and especially with the co-naming. And I love the introduction of, community garden in local Kaurna language, and it's in the right spot. So it's Laurel Avenue Community Garden, but and that's how you introduce words into other cultures, is you constantly replace that word. Like I use ciao all the time, and French and Italian and all sorts of languages. So I think it's really good if we start introducing languages across the board in commonplace. So really well done. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Otherwise I'll go back to Councillor Jones. You happy for me to put the motion? All right, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Next one is Councillor Hughes, Bluestone Curbing Policy Review.
Thank you. There is an alternate motion that I'm putting up, so I will read that out. I think that's the one that we've sent through. So that council received...
Just remove the two it apostrophes in the it's, please.
Oh, that wasn't... Sorry. That was a typo, Jane. Yes. It's team effort on that one. So that council receive a report on existing bluestone curbing and guttering by October 2021 that considers the extent and locations within the City of Burnside, including its heritage and character status, considers the management and preservation options of existing bluestone curbing, particularly when planning roadworks and curbing upgrades and when identified on site, and how this is managed under the current policy, outlines the options available if council was to consider increasing the scope of restoration and rehabilitation of bluestone curbing and guttering, and details the outcomes following the completion of the Parkway Bluestone Restoration Project. And then part two is workshops these issues before completion of the report to council in October, and considers the revised bluestone curbing policy following receipt of the report. So as you will all be aware, we obviously had the Parkway project, which made it into this financial year's budget, and that was quite a unique project given its local heritage status. Following on from that, within Councillor Davies and my ward, we've had an issue raised in Rochester Street where there was bluestone curbing found. And I guess the real reason and the drive for getting some more information around this before considering the policy is just to understand, I guess, the extent of bluestone within the City of Burnside and how we can better manage that. Obviously, it's seen for its heritage and character status within the city. And I think one of the key issues, and I guess I speak with my engineering hat on there, is understanding what the implications are when that's found on site. So I guess understanding what those implications are, whether it be drainage issues and how that's managed under the current policy. So I think we've obviously, Councillor Davey and myself have had that within our ward. And then I guess understanding, well, what are the options to council around the scope of restoration and rehabilitation. I think this is really just worth having a discussion around. There's obviously been some issues within our ward, and I'm not sure how that rolls out within the city, but I appreciate there will be certain pockets of the city that this is found and is more common than others. So I think getting the outcome of the Parkway project and understanding what the final costs were and the process that went through will be important to help us and create an informed decision when we then go through and review the policy with that in mind. And then I think one of the key things is really to be able to have a workshop, because I think if we are gathering this information and it comes back to council, we'll probably then spend time 30 minutes debating that, whereas really if we can all sit down in a room and understand the outcomes of that report before a policy comes back to council, I think that will be helpful to work through some of the issues and for staff to communicate how this process is managed on site, and I think really to understand what I guess the implications are to a project when we find bluestone curbing, and what that means also from a budget sense, but also understanding and deciding as a council really the heritage and the character status that adds to the city, and having that discussion. So that was the reasoning for varying from the original motion, given the experience that Councillor Davey and I have had in our ward. So I also want to thank Councillor Davey for the work that she's done today, helping getting the motion to what it is, because my motion was perhaps a bit more engineering to start with. So yes, I hope you will support this, so that we can gather some more information to then make an informed decision on the final policy. Thank you.
Seeking a seconder, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm happy to second the motion. As Councillor Hughes has outlined, this is an opportune time now with the policy up for review, and bearing in mind the issues we've had in our ward when there was a road resurfacing process going on, and what we're trying to do is do an assessment, some sort of an assessment council-wide, so that we've got a benchmark. We know where the bluestone is. We know there's remnants in Eastwood, Dulwich, Rose Park. We've certainly got some in Leabrook. We really don't know the extent of it all, and then how that fits into our heritage and well, just protecting the heritage and character of our streets, what is actually heritage listed and what isn't. And so we've got a benchmark so that we don't have problems when the work's actually being undertaken and there's this huge flurry of angst and the staff can be put in a really difficult position. So it's getting a benchmark, and then for having us, as Councillor Hughes has said, having us, once we've got the information, being able to look at it in a workshop and see what approach and focus we want to give it in Burnside. It's the last remnants of our heritage in terms of the old bluestone cobblestones, which many people still value. In some ways they're not practical, but in more modern ways of managing them, they can be managed quite well. And for those of you who've seen the Parkway project in Leabrook, which has now been completed, it's yet to be tested with a big rain event, because that will be the true measure of the pudding in terms of how the drainage works. But the administration have done a fantastic job getting that done. That's not necessarily the benchmark for the rest of the city, but that shows what can be done when there is heritage bluestone. So that's the peak ideal. So hopefully you'll support this, and then we can receive a report, workshop the outcomes, and receive a report to council. Thank you.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question to the administration. There's nothing stopping us running any motion like this on any policy, even if it's not up for review. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Could I do a follow-up question? Sorry, Your Worship.
Well, just check. Is there anyone else who has a question? Councillor Turnbull, and then I'll come back.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, just to refresh my memory, how much did that project cost? The Leabrook one, yeah. Sorry?
Through the Mayor, the budget for the project was $260,000. We're not quite finished yet. We've mostly finished works. We've got a couple of issues with cars scraping still that we need to rectify, so we don't have a final cost yet, but that was the original budget.
Now, Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Now, crap, I've lost my train of thought. I should write these things down. It was in the line with there's nothing wrong with us actually adopting the current policy that you've drafted and still doing this work and redoing the policy in 6 months' time.
Through Madam Mayor, that is an acceptable approach. The council is able to review any of its policies at any time it chooses. So the answer is yes to your question.
So you wish to speak now?
I'd like to move an amendment, if I could, to actually adopt the policy. And I do understand where you're coming from, and we can still change the policy. I'm a stickler for the rules, and we're coming to audit season, and to have a policy that's overdue for review, that it's come to this chamber and we haven't ticked it off, that we've reviewed it, but we can still change it at a later date. Let's just approve it. So that's my amendment.
You probably will need to amend number 2 as well, though, Councillor Cornish, because it considers the revised.
Then I don't think that you should accept it then,
Oh, well,
because it's too contrary.
The word would be the revised, because we have, it's still the revised.
It would still be revised.
It'll still be revised anyway, so.
Yeah.
Okay, don't worry about it. You keep going with
Oh.
your amendment.
I'm not,
They're not going to accept it.
we accept that. I wouldn't be opposed from, yeah.
Well, what's the risk in not accepting it?
The risk is that we haven't reviewed a policy.
Hang on. Can I have the answers coming through
Yeah.
the CEO through management rather than
I
from the
made that
member,
up.
please? Now we'll get the CEO's answer.
Through Madam Mayor, Councillor Cornish can move an alternate motion, which will be along the lines as of the original motion, but it will be classed as an alternate motion, not an amendment.
So this one will have to leave us, right?
So if you move an alternate motion now, they'll have to be dealt with. Just give me 2 seconds.
Mr. CEO, let's not worry about it. It's dragging the meeting down, so I'll withdraw.
Oh, no, if I may, Madam Mayor, I'm quite clear now.
The answer is relevant anyway, because for anyone else who wants to ask a question on any other policy, it's worth having an answer.
In terms of the order, we need to deal with this motion first because of the substantially different nature of yours.
Okay.
So Council will deal with this motion, then you're at liberty to pursue your thought.
Adopt the policy. Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else? Councillor Lemon, you speak next. And was that a hand up, Councillor Cornish? Sorry, Councillor Davis? Okay.
And I have a question.
Yeah.
So, who gets the question first, me or Joan?
You.
Thank you. Thank you. My question is actually to administration. This is coming back, this motion comes back to us in October. Do you have most of this information already? Is October a good date, or could it be earlier? I'm conscious that until we have these workshops, we won't have a policy. So if there's anything that needs to be done, we've got... Oh, the old policy, of course. Yes. Do we have this information already, the stuff that's being asked for in this motion?
Through Madam Mayor, I'll refer that to Mr. Kent.
Through your worship, we've got some of the information available, but not all of it. There's a bit of work to pull together, and there's quite a bit to go through. Our team were consulted with by the mover, and we agreed on this date when the mover recommended it, particularly because they also wish to have a workshop in there as well. We also have to be able to fit it into the workshop schedule as we proceed.
Next question or speaker is Councillor Davis.
Do we need to, what's the time requirement to amend this policy? Do we have to do it, or could we just let it continue on, or are we going to become insolvent if we don't adopt it?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll just seek advice from Mr. Cooper on this one.
Through the Mayor,
We would continue working with the current policy until the policy has been reviewed and adopted accordingly. So for now, we're just carrying on with the policy that we have.
Thank you, Mr Cooper. No, Councillor. No. Well, you can ask another one in a moment after Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor. My viewing of the paperwork is that the last review of the bluestone curbing was February 2019. So this is only actually 2 years old. So it's not a hugely outdated policy in terms of, I mean, certainly it's in the cycle and all that, the wonderful work that the staff do to schedule all the reviews and all the work associated with them. But this is only 2 years old. So I just wondered if that's not relevant.
He has withdrawn it.
We've actually already had from Mr Cooper saying that this is a valid one and we continue using it until there's a new one. But I think Councillor Davis was trying to get onto the fact, is there anything illegal, inappropriate, that we're doing if we are delaying? And I can see a lot of shaking heads over there, so I'll let the CEO answer.
No, through Madam Mayor, for clarity, we'll continue utilising this policy, and Council, well, I guess, wouldn't be acting ultra vires if we continued implementing this policy, even though the due date for review may fall outside of where we're currently at.
I will just sum up very briefly, and Councillor Turnbull mentioned and asked about the cost of the parkway, and I guess this was one of the reasons of the report is to understand, I guess, that project, what the costs were, but then also really to understand some of the cost and implications of what happens when we do find this bluestone and how we manage that on site. And I guess that's kind of covered under 1.2, under the current policy. What does it mean if we find it? How do we manage it? And what's the cost? And I guess also trying to understand some of the engineering and technical issues associated with it and how that's managed. So it's really just, I guess, to gather more information to then be able to make an informed decision on the curbing and guttering.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Councillor Turnbull, number 11.4.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment to the report that's here, and my amendment will be up. And you can see that the first 4 parts of it are the same as in the agenda, but number 5 has been changed, and I'll read it. Note the following in respect to the Era Water 2021-2022 budget. 5 Part 1, concern in respect to the additional revenue anticipated from external customers, given as 53 megalitres to be identified and connected before the start of the 2021-22 irrigation season. And 5 Part 2, there's the risk that the current borrowing limit of $15.3 million may be exceeded should activities fail to meet budget expectations. And 5.3, Era Water's consistent failure in past years to meet approved budgets. In number 6, notwithstanding item 5, but we approved the ERA Water 2021-22 budget in the interest of the ongoing operations of the subsidiary. Number 7, subject to a full reconciliation of the 2021 repayment arrangement in accordance with the Council Resolution C12529, dated 28th of April 2020, agree to prepay 90% of the budgeted volume of water to be distributed to Council reserves for the forthcoming irrigation season, to be paid in advance to Era Water on the 1st of July 2021. Number 8, request that the Chief Executive meet with senior ERA water representatives to establish strategies to assist Era Water achievement of their 2021-22 budget. May I speak? So in moving this way, I note that we are addressing the 2021-22 draft budgets for 5 of the Council's subsidiaries. Look, I've no issue with 4 of the 5, and I expect that other councils will probably feel the same. But the exception for me is Era Water. I do have concerns, and these are documented in point 5 of the motion. Particularly that there is a risk, and I emphasise that word risk, that the current borrowing limit of $15.3 million may be exceeded should activities fail to meet the approved budget. And there's a concern about the short time frame of the identification of future new customers. There's been a lengthy gap in leadership, which has impacted probably on progress in servicing customers and finding new outcomes. Elements of the proposed budget seem to be speculative and based on predictions, which are not strongly supported. There's a real concern that Irrawater has a significant past history of not being able to meet budgets. And I repeat, there's a real risk that Irrawater may exceed its borrowing limit of $15.3 million. On page 96, it states in the report, the forecast closing debt is $15.25 million, which is only $0.05 million, 500,000 below the debt cap. I'm not proposing we don't accept the budget, but I think point 6 is important, that we draw attention to the potential weakness. I'm drawing attention to the potential weaknesses in the draft budget. So that part where we ask our council executives to be proactive in working with Irrawater senior staff in order to establish some strategies that would support Irrawater in meeting its budget. So I hope that you'll support this motion.
I seek a seconder. Councillor Jones, you wish to speak or withhold your opportunity? All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak or ask a question? Councillor Piggott. Councillor Turnbull, could you just turn your microphone off?
Sorry.
Yeah, look, I'd certainly like to speak to this. I did have, perhaps later on, but I did have a question about East Waste. But in regard to Irrawater, I will speak to this motion, and I will support the motion. I feel number 5 is probably a bit of a baseball bat, but it does reflect the concerns this council does have in regard to Irrawater. This council clearly does have and should have in regard to Irrawater. It is an ongoing process. I think the gains made in the last 12 months are actually significant. Things out of our control are still to be resolved. But the issue around the borrowing limit is alive and well, and I congratulate Councillor Turnbull for raising it and also addressing it in part in the short term in number 7, where we repeat what we did last year and contribute prepay effectively for the water we expect to receive in July, which takes a bit of pressure off the cash flow for Irrawater and pays for water we're going to receive anyway. So from that point of view, I will support that. Requesting the Chief Executive meet with senior Irrawater. I understand that already Irrawater probably occupies a reasonable amount of time of the Chief Executive, and so that I feel is also a reasonable request of this council, of its Chief Executive. So I will support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Piggott. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Davies.
Thank you. I have a question. I recognise everything that's been said, but is 5.3 not a bit heavy-handed as a public statement to make for one of our authorities?
Through Madam Mayor, I guess I'd refer that question to the mover and seek their comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think it is.
Sorry. You have to say that, talk about that when you do the summary of the council. You don't have to question. Sorry, Councillor Davis? Oh, no, you didn't. I just saw your name on here. Councillor Hughes.
I'll speak very briefly, and I'm reluctant to support it mostly because of 5.3. I think having spent nearly 2 years on Irrawater, it has actually come a significant way, and I think it's very easy for a group of people to sit here and be critical of that. But I think there has been a great movement, and you were all invited to a workshop last year where our financial advisor and GM at the time were trying to be transparent about the position that we're in, and I think there's no denial of the fact that 15.3 million being exceeded is probably not just a risk. It's probably something that potentially really, really will happen in the near future. So I don't necessarily, have an issue with 5.3. I think, yes, it is a risk. I think the 5.1 though, given some of the information we provided, yes, there's always a risk we won't get external customers on, but there is a significant amount of work that's been done. You'll all appreciate the challenges that Era Water has been in with no board, with no general manager and no chairperson through no fault of our own, perhaps through some fault of some of us, but not all of us. And now I'm just speaking in riddles. So I support 7. I think it's fantastic that we're willing to try and assist, and Councillor Turnbull has come up with ways of how can we assist this subsidiary. I think the other 2 councils actually stumped up their 100% last year. I don't have an issue with saying the 90%. It's something that's better than nothing, and we are the biggest customer. I think Part 8 though is actually happening as a board. There's already scheduled a meeting this month with the CEO. So I think, yes, note some concerns, but there are concerns that we should potentially have with every subsidiary. I think 5.3 to me is just really, maybe I'm taking it a little bit personally because I'm the one sitting in the hot seat on behalf of this council and a board member, but I won't support it because of 5.3. I think as a board, we've done a really, really tough job over the last year to try and be honest and try and be realistic in what we're budgeting. And you've seen the change in that over the last year and a half. So for that reason, I think I'm probably taking it personally, but I won't support it for that reason.
Councillor Davis.
I don't really understand the strategy here. So obviously this is meant to send a political statement to those people, those employees, and also the other councils in respect of Era Water. And I think there's a constructive way to do that, to engage in it, and particularly every elected member here has the option to engage with our representatives, to speak with our CEO to find out. This is, I get it, it's making a political statement. So essentially what we're saying as a council is we're very, very disappointed with it. But you know what? I don't think that's going to fly with anybody in our residents, because point 8, request the Chief Executive meet with the Era Water representatives. That's not a solution. That's not being intuitive, that's not being intelligent, that's not doing anything, because he's already doing that. It's already a hot topic for the City of Burnside Council. So what we're doing is we're criticising the staff, we're criticising our board members, we're criticising ourselves, and posing no solution to it. So it's always good to smack someone, but when I suppose when my parents brought me up, they taught me to implement tact, discretion and courtesy. And I certainly don't think this motion does that. I think it's merely a political statement as potentially to cover somebody's ass if they, apologies for saying ass, but if they get criticised. But it doesn't do that. All it does is just make it more difficult to communicate with our other constituent councils. It makes a more hostile place and it puts more pressure on Era Water to do what? Well, not much, because we're aware of the issues, we always have been. So if there's a specific issue that an elected member thinks should change, that's what you should be moving in the motion, rather than just sitting here and whacking them. Yeah. I just don't see it as constructive and achieves very little, so I won't support the motion.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Your Worship. Similarly, 5.3 for me is probably my troublesome. I'd prefer it to be deleted or amended, the wording, purely from the fact that every one of our regional subsidiaries, including this council, fails to meet its approved budget. It's always different at the end of the year. That's why it's a budget. And I don't think we can slap them. I get the sentiment of what you're trying to get at here with that point, that it is probably not in the best position over the past couple of years, but the way it's worded is failure to meet, in past years, to meet the approved budgets. But this council's never met its approved budget. So I just think it's a bit ignorant of us to actually say that when pretty much everyone doesn't meet its approved budget at the end of every year. So it's that one, I don't want to put my name to that one. Sorry, thanks.
Councillor Dawes.
I have 2 questions, but I'm going to ask one first. Can the administration advise us, it comes out of point 7, how much of the 100 megalitres has Burnside Council used in 2021? I'm supposing we're not using any more now because it's winter, but how much of the 100 have we used?
Through Madam Mayor, I'll refer to Mr Cant. Through Madam Mayor, we'll take on notice. Oh, at the minute it'll be slightly less. My understanding was we're on track to use our allocation, but the team just want to check our final figures. But my understanding is if we don't achieve it, we'll go very, very close to achieving our allocation.
I'd like to move an amendment with respect to the mover. I'd like to remove 5.3, leave the rest as it is. Look, I believe and support the sentiment. We're not happy with the way Irrawater's going. I think there's nothing to be gained by publicly making that particular statement. Like Councillor Cornish says, budgets are there, there's a plan, and we're merely just stating a fact. We could apply that statement to, you know, anything. We could put in a motion that, you know, we acknowledge that whatever seemed to happen. I think there's nothing, I don't see any gain in that. I see only negative outcomes. And look, Councillor Davis talked about how he was brought up, you know, and I really stick by the idea of if you don't have anything nice to say, change your view. You know, look at it. This is always has been a risky undertaking. It is a good project though. It is a worthwhile project. We are neck deep in it. And we have resolved as a council to stay the course. We've resolved as a council to continue supporting Irrawater, and I think while that is our position to support Irrawater, we should be supportive of Irrawater, and I think 5.3 is unsupportive, which is why I would like that removed.
Do I have a seconder to the amendment? Councillor Lemon?
Yes, I'm happy to second it. I had my hand up to speak, particularly about what was 5.3. The stuff that's actually there under 5.1 and 5.2 and the others is material we already know. Having taken out what I consider a spiteful swipe at Irrawater makes me much more comfortable about supporting this motion. Irrawater is in its 7th year. It's 10% of the time that it's supposed to have. A 7th year. And pretty much for the entire time, this council has done nothing but snipe at it about its failures one way or another in a variety of ways. And I find that very disturbing, because what's happened as a result of that is that we've possibly, as a subsidiary of 3 councils, not had the staff that we want as the general managers, not been able to attract the proper chairs because of the perpetual sniping. And I think it needs to stop. As Councillor Hubel just said, we support this, we should support it. And we should continue to support this Irrawater. While we fund it, we should continue to support it. It is one of our subsidiaries. As far as I'm aware, the other 2 councils that are part of this support it without the sniping. So I think we really should have a good, hard, long look at ourselves and the reasons why we carry on like this. We don't with other subsidiaries, but we do with Irrawater, a brand new subsidiary that is in its 7th year of a 70-year project. So yes, I'm happy to actually support this amended motion that takes the sniping out of it. Thank you.
Councillor Dawes.
This is my second question. Can administration advise whether the Era Water Audit Committee approved this budget?
Through Madam Mayor, I just refer that Mr Cooper.
Through the Mayor, yes, I can confirm that is the case.
Right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the amendment? There's not many left to speak. Councillor Dawes.
Yeah, I don't agree that if you feel there's an issue with a subsidiary or anything else, it's not sniping, it's actually indicating to the residents that there's something wrong here. And I have no problem saying that it's not a matter of tact, discretion or courtesy. To me, it's about explaining to residents what is happening with an organisation that unfortunately hasn't got a good track record. My main concern was really with 5.1, that we've sold 47 megalitres to date after 7 years. Councillor Lemmons mentioned 7 years. 53 megalitres is going to be sold next financial year. We've got no general manager, we've got no chairperson. I believe that the general manager might be appointed last week, but it's a mighty task to sell 53 megalitres. I don't want to have quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3 and end of year for the next year, and every time from 600,000 it gets bigger and bigger. I want them to be realistic. I do not think it's a realistic budget. And what worries me is the effect on Burnside Council, because we are a third responsible for any loss. So if, for instance, we don't sell 53 megalitres, there's $230,000 that's not going to be received in income, another $75,000 for Burnside Council to pay out. And yet we are seeking a 0% rate rise. So they are my concerns, and I am worried once again that we have not got a realistic budget. So I won't be supporting the amendment, and I just feel we need to, and I'll say it again, tell our residents when something's not going right. It's not a matter of tact or discretion or courtesy. Let's say it what it is, but within reasonable words, and that's, I think I've been reasonable in what I'm saying tonight. Thank you.
Davis, you have a question?
Where an elected member has a concern or doesn't believe that a budget item is correct, and they would like to amend that, what is the process for an elected member amending the budget?
Well, through Madam Mayor, if it's an adopted budget, it must go through the council process.
No, but what if we don't agree with that?
Good question. Through Madam Mayor, I don't know if Mr Cooper's got an opinion.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, Council has the option of not adopting the budget that's been presented to Council. And generally, if that was the case as part of the resolution, you would include some questions or clarifications back to the subsidiary for resolution and representing that budget for adoption. So that's basically the method that you would require if you're not happy as a council with the budget that's been presented.
Councillor Hubel, you have a question?
Yes, Madam Mayor, through the papers made available to the public, is the agenda with the attached budget made available to the public?
The answer is yes.
Through Madam Mayor, yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah.
Is there anyone else who has a question? If there's not, then I shall go back to Councillor Davis for another question.
So if the council, despite us in 5.1 expressing concern, this council is endorsing the budget, making no amendment to it, and agreeing exactly to what the budget is. Is that right?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Jones, I think you're the only one.
Sorry. Trying to work out how to frame this as a question. Surely a council cannot just change the budget of a subsidiary. It would need to be the subsidiary itself that changed that budget.
So through you, Madam Mayor, so we would, yes, you are correct, Councillor, but we're able to make, if council is of a mind, make recommendations to the subsidiary for their consideration.
Which they can then ignore completely or take on board some of the queries, questions, concerns. Right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? So otherwise I will go back to Councillor Hubel. No, sorry. He's the one. It's an amendment. Ah, sorry, we have to put the amendment. Right, those in favour of the amendment? Those against? Councillor Davies, is that your hand up? Yeah. So the amendment was won, was carried. Original motion without 5.3, and we were with Councillor, I think Councillor Jones, you're about the only one. Yes, I know, but there's still an opportunity. We haven't actually had a seconder on that, but we have a seconder, but the seconder didn't speak. So do you wish to speak on this now, Councillor Jones? Okay.
Unless anybody else.
Oh, I mean, it doesn't matter. Even if there is someone else who hasn't spoken,
Okay.
you still can go next if you wish.
Yes. I'm glad that Councillor Hughes raised the question of the workshop that was held in Norwood. Was it earlier this year or late last year? Because the former general manager very clearly said, I think we're going to run out of money and we're going to breach the debt cap. And now we have a budget that says, oh, we're just about not going to not breach the debt cap. So you'll forgive me, given that, as long as I've been involved with Era Water and before, they have consistently overestimated what their revenue will be and underestimated what their costs will be, that in fact what will happen this year is that they will breach the debt cap and they'll be coming to us later this year to say, we need to borrow some more money, please. So that's why I think Councillor Turnbull put in the 5.3 that has now been removed, is not to snipe at Era Water, which as at the moment I think has got 0 staff. So there's not particularly, there's one contractor I believe who's not been there very long and the GM has left. So we're not really sniping at anyone other than ourselves. So I don't think we're sniping. What we are doing, as Councillor Dawes has rightly pointed out, is flagging to our ratepayers that we're on the ball and we are watching this subsidiary because it has made losses that were much more than it has budgeted to. And let me tell you, if EHAR was losing hundreds of thousands of dollars rather than breaking even per its budget, I'd be having to go at them saying, what the hell is going on? So this is not sniping, it's saying, we have some scepticism about your budget, we will approve it because we think that's the right thing to do, it helps the subsidiary get on. We'll pay you some money early to assist you with not breaching the debt cap, but be warned, we expect you to meet your budget and we're fed up of hearing excuses. And that's what it is to me. So I hope you will support this motion.
Now, I don't think there's anyone else who actually... Councillor Carbone? No? Councillor Piggott? Question? Certainly.
And it's not about Era Water, if that's okay.
You did mention earlier that you had a question about a different subsidiary.
and I am remiss in not asking this prior to the meeting, but I am interested because I think we all should. East Waste, page 55, I just wonder whether administration could throw any light, because I couldn't find, in all the sort of fluff of the East Waste presentation, I couldn't find any details actually on the numbers. Why the materials contracts have gone up by 1.4 million and employee costs seem to have gone down by 400. There's also grant income there as well, which I suspect are all related, but I just wonder whether there was any clarity around that point. I note that our charges have gone up.
Board representative should be able to speak to that.
No, it's not his job.
Through the Mayor, no, we haven't had any commentary around those variations. We'd have to go back on and take those questions on notice.
Councillor Davey, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do in regards to East Waste. We've focused on Era Water, but I have a couple of questions actually. On page 48 in the draft strategic plan, one of the objectives is to help develop a local circular economy. 4.3, support councils to implement sharing economy and reuse initiatives. And I just wondered, have we got any of those in place already? Has this already started by East Waste?
Through Madam Mayor, I'll refer that to Mr. Cant.
Through your worship, sorry, I was just finding the page in the agenda myself. I believe we've commenced conversations with East Waste about opportunities with respect to that and the considering regional opportunities. One of the initiatives that they have started looking at is the hard waste trial that was recently the subject of an information document to council, which obviously talked about the circular procurement there and reusing additional hard waste there as well. So that's just an example of some of the initiatives they're looking at.
Is there anyone else who has any other questions? Otherwise, Councillor Davey, did you say you had a second one or another one? No. Okay, all right. Are there any other questions? Any other? I think Councillor Carbone's the only one left to speak. Otherwise, I will go back to Councillor Turnbull and let her sum up.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't take long to sum up, but I do think that it is part of our brief as being members of this council to oversee subsidiaries on behalf of the ratepayers. We just can't sit back and keep paying for not much. And in the 2.5 years that I've been on council, there hasn't been a lot of progress that I've seen. It just seems to be slightly disorganised and nothing much happening. So I would like you to think that it's not sniping, but it's just a worried councillor, and some of us are, on behalf of our ratepayers who really like to see other things being done with all that money that's going to support the loan for Era Water. I mean, we can buy our own water from South Australian Water for the same price, perhaps cheaper, and perhaps that should be looked into. The whole thing doesn't really sit well. So I'd ask you to support this. So we at least if we have our CEO or our senior staff working with Era Water, we might be able to see some progress. Thank you.
I put the motion. All those in favour?
Which motion is
This is the one that's up on the screen now. Against? Carried. Right. We now move to 6 against, 4 and 5 against. Yeah, just double checking. I've got representation, that was Davey. Yeah, I think it was Councillor Davey. Representation review. Yes, it's you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Turnbull, could you turn your microphone off, thank you. Now you're right.
Moving that, in line with the report, that Council 1 identify its preferred future ward structure as option 1, as presented in the options paper, attachment B, consisting of 6 wards and 12 councillors. 2, keep the existing ward names for the current representation review cycle. Can I actually change that to retain the existing ward names? Retain the existing ward names for the current representation review cycle. 3, include an action for the Reconciliation Action Plan Working Group to seek approval from the Ghana Language Group on potential co-naming opportunities for council wards. And 4, note that council will be presented with a draft representation review report on the 8th of June 2021 for consideration prior to the final community consultation period. This representation review is carried out and was due as part of the 8-year cycle of review, and it was aligned to a move by the state government for local government reform in terms of, as we were told, wanting reduced numbers on councils. Largely designed, we were told, in the interests of increased efficiencies. But I believe these can and often do result in reduced representation but for the community and control and influence. And that's why I'm supporting option 1, as our residents have indicated. Councillors serve the community by representing their views on council, as the report has outlined, and we all know by setting objectives, establishing priorities between competing demands, deciding how resources should be raised and allocated. We are the 3rd tier of government, councils, and we have to manage and address really important current issues being imposed on us by the wider community, the political system, the economic system, the environmental system, a whole range of issues. How we manage sustainable development and set goals for this, how we manage climate change, how we deal with population and urban growth, and some other broader social and environmental issues. So I don't think it's democratically defensible to impose reduced electorate member representation or councillors on the City of Burnside. We've been told in the report and in the review that boards need to be reduced, and there are ideas about the numbers on boards. But I'll point out that councils are not a board. We are at the 3rd tier of government, and somehow we've got enrolled into the board concept. Our community deserves to maintain the current level of representation. We all, speaking for my colleagues, work very hard to represent our local and the broader community on the range of committees, reference groups, boards and authorities we all participate in, plus our myriad community involvements and enterprises which exist to serve the increasingly complex needs of the Burnside community. We remain volunteers, elected to represent our constituents and receive a very small allowance to contribute to this. The Burnside community have spoken and want the status quo, and I think we should support that and pursue this. I ask for your support with this. Thank you.
Councillor Davis, you wish to second?
Yes. And I'll speak now. I'm sure many of you have tried to do some statistical gymnastics to try and figure out what exactly these stats mean, and to try and figure out whether it is just us voting to save our own necks around the table, whether that's actually what the statistics represent. In my view, looking at particularly page 182, the way that I've approached it was to look at whether people would prefer 10 or 12, because there's no majority, obviously. The highest is being 12, but if you had a look at say, how out of the percentage of people who would prefer to have 12 or 10 councillors, that was 53.4% together, and then of those, a vast majority preferred 12. And then the next best option would be to look at, say, 10 and 9, or 10 and the next two closest would be 10 and 9, which is only 35%. So to me, I feel quite comfortable in terms of going with the 12 councillors, and I think we will potentially get criticism from the media where they'll say that we're trying to save our own jobs, but that's my thought process on it. And I would also suggest the media consider on page 187, and if you have a look at the graphs in terms of strongly agree and strongly disagree, in terms of those options, I actually think that that's quite helpful. Because if you have a look at the others, well, that strongly disagree or the disagree options for anything other than 12 also dramatically increase. Whereas, option 1, they're much reduced. So that's why I think that is the right decision and not just a self-serving one, as best as I can figure. But those are my statistical gymnastics, and I'm sure that it'll be reported as that only a third of people want 12 councillors, and will be sniped at. But there you go.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? We did have a comprehensive workshop on this, where we covered all of the issues concerned. And there will be a report that, of course, goes from the council to the Electoral Commission with a recommendation once it's gone out to community for their input as well. That's correct, isn't it? Councillor Carr.
Question, if I may, Your Worship, to the CEO. So since our workshop, a number of councils have met to discuss this very item, and I'm just wondering if any councils that you're aware of have voted to drastically reduce the elected members moving forward.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I have to refer that to Mr. Cooper, but Mr. Cooper's staff.
I can tell you that Unley are voting to reduce their number. That community consultation has said to reduce.
Through the Mayor, that's correct. I
Mayor's
can
told me that.
confirm the City of Unley out to consultation for 10 elected members. The others have not gone out to community consultation yet with their preferred number.
Campbelltown don't have to because they already went and did their change 4 years ago, about 4 years ago. Prospect are only just starting their process right now. The first consultation has gone out, giving people 8 options. I think that was one of the things we learned, is we gave people too many options. And what was the other era one? Norwood, Peters weren't at the last meeting. I'm not sure where they're up to. Sorry? They're not, oh, that's right, they don't have to do it. And the other one can't have to do it either. I think that was the story. Walkerville. Yeah, Walkerville don't have to do it. Oh, no, they're doing theirs too. But there's no change. They're already small. Yeah. Councillor Hughes.
I was just going to make a very brief point, given that Councillor Carbone asked that question in all my free time. I read lots of things, and one of them was Unley's review I read online. Their report was very, very similar to ours. Interestingly, we've come to a different conclusion. The document looked very similar, but what was most interesting was that they only had 22 responses to their initial survey, whereas we had over 400. So I think that says something about how active our community is and perhaps how interested they are, or maybe because we sent it out with the focus, but I think it's really positive, the response we got.
I must say, when I met with the era mayors last week, they were absolutely shocked at the number that we got in response compared to all of them so far. But one of the things I did actually say was exactly what you said. I think what we won, where we won this time, was actually that it went out with the Focus magazine. And I think that's why we got as much response as we did. And none of the others have done it that way either, so it will be interesting. Prospects document was about, I picked one up when I was out there last week. It's about 12 pages. I can imagine our residents going through about 12 pages of reading, trying to come to kind of any kind of conclusion. And they're already small anyway. Right, I've got Councillor Carbone, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Hubel. You had a question, I believe. or wanted to speak?
Oh, if it's my turn, I'll go
Yes,
now.
it
I
is.
thought I was down the list a bit.
No.
All good.
You've caught up.
Look, no, I also believe that status quo is the way to go for now. And look, I think the workshop we had late April was very, very good. I think it was really one of those times where informal gatherings we have really allows us to nut things out and discuss exactly where we all stand on things. And look, and I refer back to, you know, my feelings on the night. Look, I see the status quo, got 156. These are my figures from the night, so correct me if my notes were wrong in the evening. Then we had 219 for a reduction. So obviously there were more people saying they wanted a reduction. But the status quo, there was one choice to stay, but 4 of the choices were to lower. So I think, you know, with all the discussion going around, we can look at, you know, the way we ask. Sorry?
Don't interrupt, please.
Yeah, exactly.
Let Councillor Hibble finish.
And look, I think we could reflect and go, look, you know, we could probably, had our time again, we would have designed that a little bit better and keep it the same or change, was the question, and then elaborate from there. But look, I think that the data we've gotten, I'm comfortable enough at the moment that keeping the status quo is the way to go. I, you know, really believe Councillor Davies' arguments of, you know, proportional representation. You know, the more of us there are, the better direct representation our residents get, and I think that's a good thing. You know, also there was something else I was going to say, and I'm not quite sure what that was. My apologies, I'll have to leave it there. If I remember it, I'll try and veil it as a weird question later.
Correct me if I'm wrong, it's a question, and then do you have your hand? When this consultation goes out, we're asking the community to respond to it and say whether they like the idea. They still have the opportunity to say, no, we don't like the idea. Is that right?
That's correct, Madam Mayor. But in this case, we'll be going out, being very clear that our preferred option is status quo.
But they still have the opportunity to respond and say, no, we don't like that.
Certainly.
But we're very interested to see how much response we get second time round. I'll go to Councillor Lem and then I'll come back to you, Councillor.
Thank you. I just want to take this opportunity in a public forum to pass comment on the fact that when we look at things like ward representations and we look at the population, the adult population of Burnside, it is people on the electoral roll only that are part of this process. So when we look at 2 ward councillors that have 2,500 people apiece, what's not taken into account is the amount of foreign nationals and people that aren't on the electoral roll. So we're looking at anybody under the age of 18 and anybody that's not an Australian citizen. And in my area alone, the Electoral Commission says that the number of people in my area has gone down by several hundred, or possibly, I don't know, I'd have to go and have a look, and I can't remember off the top of my head. In actual fact, the actual numbers have gone up, and instead of about 5,000 people, or 4,900 people, my ward actually has close on 7,000 people, which includes children and non-citizens. Every one of those people is able, and other wards are similarly affected, every one of those people is able to get in touch with us as the local member, the local councillor, because they are residents or they're ratepayers, and they may not necessarily be citizens. And I think that that's something that is seriously overlooked in the way that this particular representation review is done. And I think there needs to be some sort of understanding in future that councillors are also at the beck and call of people that are not on the electoral roll, and there needs to be a way of incorporating that in terms of the quantity of people that are looked after by each person. I just wanted to make that point.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Worship. I do have a question. It's regarding the bill, the LC bill. Is there a determination yet regarding there being a cap on numbers stated in the bill? Or is that, I've got here that was to be confirmed. Where do we sit with that?
So through Madam Mayor, my understanding is the bill with amendments has gone through the upper house. It's been referred back to the lower house. And the initial amendment that was made around the cap on elected members has been removed. And so that has now, so that's been removed and that's been referred back to the lower house. So our understanding is all things being equal, there will be no cap in the new bill. I'm not sure that's the intent, but...
Councillor Jones.
I have a question, if I may. The report on page 190 that we are apparently forced to submit to the Electoral Commission. I mean, I have hired consultants in the past, and I have been hired as a consultant in the past, and invariably what consultants do is issue a report in draft, which you then get the opportunity to comment on, and then they either make your changes and issue it in final, or they say, don't bother to issue the report in final. So can you ask, why did we not get the opportunity to have this report in draft so that we could comment on it before they issued it in final without so much as a by your leave that we're now forced to give to the Electoral Commission?
Through Madam Mayor, I'll just see if Mr Cooper's got a comment on the peculiarity of the engagement of the consultant in this matter, because I'm not sure it's as clear-cut as it's our engagement. I think there's a nuance here with the involvement of the Electoral Commission.
Through the Mayor, we engaged the consultant Craig Rowe as the independent specialist in the area of doing representation reviews. And as you can see from their history, they've got a vast experience. They came into council as an independent expert to provide their opinion to council in line with the Act. And then it's up to council whether they believe with what the consultant is recommending, which in this case was 10, or whether for reasons other than what the consultant is recommending, council believe that we should stick with the status quo. So from EXA's perspective, EXA will look at, have we done an independent review of what the preference is or what the representation is. And then if council believes that is not the way to go, then we need the rationale. And that is why we had the independent expert come in, no different to other consultants, auditors, or independent valuation experts who come in as well. There is some level of going back and forth in terms of wording, but not the recommendation or the intent from the advice we receive.
Councillor Hughes.
So I was just going to follow up on that. So that report that they presented that had the recommendation of 10, that will go to the Electoral Commission, despite the fact that the data essentially says that 10 really wasn't the preference. So we've kind of paid for this independent advice that we don't necessarily agree with, and that the data didn't necessarily back up. Does it or does that report get is that the final report that will be submitted, or does the report that gets submitted almost tell like a story from start to finish of how we got to that point?
Through the Mayor, that is correct. Sorry, Chris. That is correct. The next report we will be receiving on the 8th of June will then say, Council considered the first consultation results. For these reasons and this rationale, Council has chosen to stick with status quo. So it does provide the entire journey of, where we got to based on the first consultation results, and then on consideration of these multiple factors, we've now landed at status quo.
And through the Mayor, if I can also add, the report that you're presented with this evening also carries on with that journey in terms of explaining why, following the subsequent analysis of the data, we're now recommending status quo.
And coming into that whole scenario is the whole issue of initially we were looking at the potential of being capped and therefore having to consider doing this again if we didn't change our numbers. So that obviously would be part of that report as well, because that does have an impact, I think, on the overall outcomes that we present to the Electoral Commission. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, through the Mayor, that's absolutely correct. And again, there's mention of that in this report, and that all forms part of the audit trail that we will provide.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to ask a question? Councillor Carbone, or speak?
Thank you, Worship. I'll speak. I have mixed views on this subject because technically the majority of people did vote for a somewhat reduction of elected members on this council. Now we can sit here and argue whether it's 10 or 8 and whether the majority laid and so forth, but generally there was a slight majority for a mood towards a small reduction. And that's why the report said what it said. But I suppose my view on this, and some harsh truths are going to come out, but I think if we're all very, very honest with ourselves, the perception of politicians in this country is not as high as it should be. It's not up there with, with nurses and doctors and so forth, where politicians seem to be at the other end of the spectrum. Definitely not lawyers. No, they don't. So we do, and like it or lump it, we are scooped into that category of politicians, even though we all know it's directed at state and federal, but we are politicians. So I think it's an unfair and unfavourable position to be asking the general community what they think of us, because we're already in that unfair situation. But I think we do deserve a pat on the back, because given that preconceived idea in people's heads about us, and I think the majority of people in Australia would say that politicians are overpaid and lazy and don't do any work and so forth. That's the harsh truth about politicians. So I think given that image is ingrained in people's minds about politicians, I think the fact that we almost had a majority of people saying, you know what, they're doing a good job. So I'm going to vote in favour of this option, even though I was leaning towards the reduction. But I think given that we are in that situation, we probably do deserve to give ourselves a couple of bonus points to remove the bias in the survey, which would give us a majority. So I think we've done very well. We all work very hard. And our community, I think in this case, have certainly backed us into the good work that we do.
I think that's also been justified in the latest community survey, where there were responses about elected members had improved quite dramatically from the previous. Well, it's on upward line rather than a downward slope. So that's always positive as well. All right, Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't going to speak, but I think I should. Initially, I was thinking of a reduction, but that was mainly because of the bill. But I was thinking 10, not 8, and yet 8 got more positive responses than 10. But what really got me at that workshop, and I think Councillor Davis mentioned it, was paragraph 76 on page 187. When you add up the strongly disagreed and the disagreed, and the strongly agreed and the agreed, the status quo was the only one that had more strongly agreed and agreed. So to me, that's the reason why I will give it a tick. But I do think in the future that perhaps we should look at a reduction in years to come, because I do think we are overgoverned personally, but based on these results, I have to support 12.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Jones.
I'll speak very briefly. Firstly, I'd like to support Councillor Davey and her comments about we're an arm of government, we're not a board. I mean, what are they going to recommend about the Senate? That's got 76 members. Perhaps they should cut that to 8. What about the House of Reps? That's got 150. It's just a joke. It's just a stupid comparison. I'd also like to say that this is the worst report I have ever read. It is totally dreadful. It asked all the wrong questions. It didn't do a statistical survey. And it just said, I think, what the consultant thought we should do. He wrote exactly the same report at Unley. I agree with Councillor Hughes there, so I will be supporting this motion.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Otherwise, I will go back to, I think it was Councillor Davey who started it off. Yes, it was Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just be very brief. Thank you very much for all your contributions. After considering all the advantages and disadvantages of each of the options that was put to us, analysis of the feedback from 466 members of our community, the developments with the proposed bill, and the provisions and intent of the Act, it has been recommended that Council select option 1 of 12 councillors and 6 wards as its future ward structure and retain the existing ward names. There's no way you can argue against this, and so I commend this recommendation to you for your support to go out for community consultation.
Those in favour? Those against? Carried. We will move over to, there are no questions on notice. There is one motion on notice which we held over last meeting because Councillor Piggott wasn't here. We held over last meeting because he wasn't here, but was previously rolled over from the previous meeting. Yeah, so we're now on third time. Lucky or unlucky, depending on which way. Councillor Piggott.
It seems so long ago, doesn't it? Okay, there's 2 motions here, isn't there? I need to speak to the rescission first. And I guess the key thing to that, we did discuss, in fact, on the rather passion-filled night of the representation review, as I remember it, we talked about McKenna Reserve, and it was, we took the decision, as you read there, to go with option 3 and reinstate it to total public control, get rid of the encroachments. And look, tonight I'm actually not asking to reverse that decision in full. I just feel that we should consider it again with all of the information, because I think there were a couple of things that we weren't across at the time that I think are relevant to the decision. And that's the things I've asked for in the motion that follows. Primarily, what is that land worth? And what is on it worth in 2 ways, actually. Financially, if we were to transfer it to the neighbours. And second, what is it worth from an environmental point of view in terms of what's on it? So the reason for rescinding the motion is to basically have another crack at it. I feel that if the decision goes the same way the second time, with the benefit of the additional information asked for, all well and good. But it was actually held up to fly a number of significant flags. It was getting in the way of fixing climate change. It was sorting out the taking one house and turning it into 2 on blocks within our suburbs. All issues alive and well, and all issues that we can take that position. But I think we should, with all the information and with the ability for our residents to understand as well, exactly what we are giving up. So I seek your support in rescinding the motion to allow us to get a bit more information for my next motion, to consider it again with all the information and not just part of it. Thanks.
Councillor Davis, were you indicating to second this? Do you wish to speak?
I reserve my right.
That was it. It's all there. Councillor Carbone is next, and then
Thank you, Worship. Earlier tonight we were talking about Era Water and how we need to be responsible and accountable to our residents. Now we are talking about a fair chunk of land, and more importantly, I believe a fair chunk of potential revenue. And this needs to be discussed fully. We can't simply dismiss it under the guise of the environment and so forth, which, as important as it is, we do also need to be not blinded but prudent when it comes to matters regarding potential revenue. Now, I've had a quick look at the size of the land, and I can tell you now, in case anyone's been living under a rock over the last year, land around Burnside has skyrocketed. And when you have a look around at either vacant land or demolition jobs, so that is a house that's going to be knocked over and built upon and so forth, you are looking at a fairly reasonable rate of around $1,800 a square metre. Now, this block of land is 639 square metres. So that's $1.1 million of land that we need to discuss properly. Now, previously we've talked about the Dulwich Community Centre and how it's in the wrong spot and all those sorts of things. Now, this is a classic case of where we should be having another look at this $1.1 million block of land and looking at what else we might be able to do, including, and not limiting to, perhaps buying another block of land and building another Dulwich Community Centre that's in a better location. So we talk about being prudent, we talk about being responsible. We cannot simply brush this under the carpet. We need to look at it properly and thoroughly. And if it's worth keeping it where it is, then so be it. But if it's worth looking at another option, well, we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to our community to have another look, because that's what's at stake.
Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I have a question, a practical question actually. If this motion gets up, does that mean that the rescinded decision cannot come back to council for 12 months?
Through Madam Mayor, I'll just seek guidance.
Through the Mayor. So if the rescission motion is successful and the following motion gets up, then the effect of that is that the original one doesn't exist, and we'll proceed with the second, the replacement motion, and what the rescission does is to exclude that from coming back for another 12, in excess of 12 months. So in the next 12 months that cannot come back.
Councillor Davey.
I have a question, if I may. If we speak on the rescission motion, are we then allowed to speak on the subsequent motion?
Yes, through Madam Mayor, yes you can, because there are two distinctly separate motions.
Thank you.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question through yourself. I'm looking at the intended second motion here, and I'm wondering, would it be possible to pass that second motion without rescinding?
Could I just pick up on Councillor Hubel's? So that's actually not the intention. If we were to get the information, get the report. I'm asking a question now. So my intention wasn't necessarily to block this, but I do feel, and if it came out at the end of the next report that was where we wanted to end up, I think that's an appropriate spot to be. So my question, following up on Councillor Hubel, if I was to perhaps, if I'm able to, bail out of this rescission and leave it sit there, could I, in the second motion, just ask that that's not acted upon until the report from the new motion is brought back to us? Could that be an appropriate way of going, which would then not block the original for 12 months if that was the way council eventually wanted to go?
Just time it, yeah. We'll just put it in.
Sorry, Councillor Lemon, I will get to your question. I just thought we might as well resolve this now.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to answer Councillor Pickett's question, yes, you can achieve your intention. We'll just need to do a bit of wordsmithing around, delay, the council delay the implementation of that existing resolution, that number, until what you're trying to achieve comes to fruition. Yes.
So, can I speak?
No, it's Councillor Lemon who's next to speak or ask a question, and then I've got Councillor Davey, then I've got Councillor Jones, and then if Councillor Davis wishes to speak.
But what's happening here? Am I being moved on from?
Your Worship, formal motion that this motion lie on the table.
Through Madam Mayor, you have a live motion in front of you. The correct approach is to deal with that. So if council is of mind to vote that,
We've got a motion that we've laid on the table.
Well, can I just ask one question first? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, while they just rabble-roused amongst themselves. Thank you. I'm just recapping on the advice I got. And if I can just say, the advice I got was, if this motion gets up, it cannot come, if it's rescinded, this motion cannot come back to this chamber for another 12 months. Is that correct? I just want a yes/no answer to that. I don't want to know the number of the Act.
yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
A formal motion from Councillor Cornish that this motion lays on the table. I need a seconder for that. Councillor Hubel, you'd like to second that? Do you wish to speak on it? Oh, no, you don't have to. Okay, so I'll put that motion.
So can I ask what the implications of that are?
Nothing happens at all. We're not voting on this on the rescission part. But we're going on to the next one. Yes?
But what would happen to the original motion then? Would that be proceeded with?
So through Madam Mayor, the original motion is in play and
Therefore it stays in play.
stays in play. but will be influenced, I imagine, by what might be moved in a minute.
I will accept a motion without no.
Can someone tell us the implications of all of this, please? We're putting off voting on a decision.
So, so
There will be a motion on notice to follow on this
Yes.
subject.
But either way, there will be.
so
Yeah, even if there were no, even if we were to go through this rescission motion, there would still be another motion following. But this is,
so-
well, only if it was,
i-
yeah,
i-
only if allowed, but I've decided to allow it, okay?
You can vote against, you allow.
If you want to, yes, you can move a motion that you disagree with the chair.
all right.
Okay,
So, just for clarity, I think we
Yes,
should
I
just
think
do a quick recap.
summarise.
The motion, so a rescission motion was moved and seconded. A motion was then moved, formal motion was moved to defer consideration. That's lay on the table, lay on the table. So that's what's before council now. If that is successful, that deals, the rescission motion goes off to the side and nothing happens, and the substantive motion that was resolved previously stands.
Until nothing happens until.
Well, hang on, just let him finish.
That's
Yeah.
part of the answer, I would have thought.
It certainly is, if you let me just get the words out.
Yes. Too many books.
Until, my understanding is that Councillor Bigger intends to move a motion in line with the second part that's alluded to in his motion on notice this evening.
Someone can pull it off the table at any time.
The rescission motion.
Once it's on the table, it can stay on the table until somebody at some point in time wishes to raise it again. Then they can raise it again and can debate it again as a motion on notice.
It has to be a motion
No, it has to be, a motion on notice to bring it back to the table
Notice.
again. It has to be formalised. But now I wish to put the
Thank you, Your Worship.
Sorry, Councillor, did you get your question? Yeah, okay. I'll cross you off the list. Councillor Lemon first, so now it's Councillor Daly.
Thank you. I oppose this rescission motion. Council considered this matter at length on the 9th of March and determined option 3 as presented by staff, which is the issue at the crux of this whole motion, to seek removal of the encroachments. This is in line with council precedents, and I draw council's attention to the recent decision to remove encroachments by householders in Matilda Lane, Eastwood, encroachments which had also been in place for a significant amount of time, and we're told that's one of the excuses for these encroachments. While I understand there's a whole lot of issues about the value of the land and the strategic value of the land, the fact remains that we have property owners who bought their properties at 2 Spencer Street in January 2017, at 4 Spencer Street in August 2011, at 55 Yeronga Avenue on the 5th of June 2008, and at 57 Yeronga Avenue, April 2007. They have all, should have been able to do and should have undertaken title searches, as part of their sale process. They knew what land they were buying and what they weren't. I also note that the adjacent Yeronga Drainage Reserve is encroached by numbers 55 and 57 Yeronga, as we're advised, and that this will be subject to another later report to Council. City of Burnside has some really historical land nuances associated with apparently poor record keeping in past administrations, which mean that we have some areas where there are encroachments happening across adjacent parklands, laneways, you name it. There's opportunistic people who just build sheds and paths and the odd other building on council land. But once this has been discovered, it doesn't mean that we should turn a blind eye to it or sell the land off, which belongs to the community. This community land in this position is very different to a small piece of community land covered in bitumen or gravel, which abuts a roadway or a verge, and which we support from time to time, these small strips of land that we sell off on roadways. This is a totally different kettle of fish. It's a very valuable attachment to McKenna Reserve. The trees identified by staff include a mix of populus, fraxinus and cupressus of varying sizes. There is one eucalyptus with a point of origin that appears to be located at 4 Spencer Street. There's also another large eucalypt. The land is very valuable, sited adjacent to a park which belongs to the people of Burnside and our environment. Please do not support this rescission motion and maintain Council's decision of the 9th of March. There is no way we can sell off this land and the community won't support it anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Now it's Councillor. I'm checking on somebody else's question, but go ahead and speak, please.
No, I'm not in favour of this rescission motion. I don't think there's any new information come about since the previous debate that would make me change my mind. I am not in the business of selling off community land. I don't care how much it's worth. I think Councillor Carbone's estimate is far too high. It's not a marketable packet of land. It's only useful to the neighbours who've encroached on it. This is a valuable addition to McKenna Reserve. It doubles the land size of McKenna Reserve. And let's look at this. This has got a stormwater drain that needs a reserve. How many stormwater drains actually need reserves? I think this is an undergrounded creek, undergrounded with the poor environmental practices of yesteryear. That means there's water. That means regardless of what the actual flora and fauna there are at the moment, which is probably not great because it's been encroached on, this has enormous environmental potential. This could be a new river redgum forest. That would be a fantastic result. The fact that we could sell it for 1.1 million, we know you can't buy stuff. We're just wasting our money trying to do so. So that's that. We've also got the urban infill issue. We have been told by one of the neighbours that they want to buy the land so they can subdivide. What was the earthly point of us constantly harping on about loss of canopy cover and there being an environmental, catastrophe that we've discovered, declared, emergency, and then saying, oh, well, as soon as someone waves a bit of money in our face, we'll say, yeah, go ahead, clear fell of the block, stick to Tuscan townhouses covering 95% of the land area on. I mean, we're just a joke if we do that, frankly. And I agree with Councillor Davey that we have to take a stand against encroachment. Otherwise, it'll be open slather on all the community land of Burnside. So that's why I won't be voting for the rescission motion, and I hope you won't either.
Now, Councillor Davis, you've indicated you wish to speak now.
Yes, please, thank you.
And then Councillor Lemon.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really good reason why we should get some more information. For everything that Councillor Jones just said. I think when you look at something like this, and there is such emotion and such, over my dead body, there will be no carbon tax under the government idly, all of that, you just need to take a big step back and calm down and think about it in a logical manner. And I remember Councillor Lemon's speech, one of the best she's ever given, about rare endangered wallabies or something that lived on the land. Cuttlefish. Was cuttlefish living on in this most valuable? This is the most valuable. Jesus, this is a tiny little pathway. There's a pathway next door. The intent of this motion, and I'll be voting against the rescission motion. I'll be voting against the rescission motion. We'll vote this down. But God, can't we ask for some information to at least understand what its value is, rather than going off on some emotion, which is really fun. It's really fun to be super emotional and not consider any facts. But there has been no information because we didn't have any information from the beginning about what it's worth. I don't think it's worth 1.1 million, but I don't know. We can at least ask the question before we proceed with it. So my intention would be that we should at least ask the question, at least get some more information, put some more meat on the bone. And I think that the answer will be as we've decided, but at least we can feel confident in making that decision. And I think there's a good chance that that's what it'll end up, and that's what I'll end up voting with. But at least slow it down, stop the emotion, keep our emotions in check with the emotional crap that's coming out of people's mouths in respect of the native value of this. $1.1 million, which won't be that. How many trees is that we could plant? How much, if you're talking about the environment, you've got to look at equivalence. It's not just one particular location. You've got to look at it holistically. And the idea that we couldn't purchase any land anywhere else, well, that's just completely strange concept, in that if you were going to sell it for such a high value that you couldn't buy something equivalent. Well, if you can sell it for a value, if land is so valuable, then potentially you could sell it for that. And then potentially you could buy a similar plot of land for the same amount of money. Allowing people to subdivide, I don't think is an argument. At least ask the question, because we don't have the facts around here. So I'm just asking people to calm down on it, not quote some rare endangered mountain galaxia fish that might inhabit the stormwater drain, and at least ask a question. Vote this motion down, but consider the motion on notice next to at least get a little bit more information, and we might end up in the same place. So a bit of pragmatism is what I'm asking for.
Councillor Lemon.
Thanks. Last time I talked about 13 species, Australian species that had died the previous year, and I just, what I don't know and what nobody knows is whether there were any species that haven't even been identified yet that have actually live on that land. Nobody knows that. Nobody in this room knows that. Nobody in this state knows that, because nobody's had a good look at it. I'm not prepared to take the chance. I don't care how much this piece of land is valued at in terms of monetary terms, because when you look at it, you're looking at something that is 4 metres wide and 100 metres long, and to me that looks like a really nice urban corridor. And for me, I think we ought to keep it, because this is our land. One of the things that we've got a real problem with in South Australia, in this council, in every council in South Australia, is that we simply don't have enough land of our own to be able to grow the tree canopy that we should grow to in fact make a real difference to canopy cover. We're lucky in Burnside because we've already got existing canopy cover. What we ought not be doing is getting rid of pieces of land that are community land that can add to our canopy cover, because we all know we might get a few $100,000. We're not going to buy another block of land somewhere else. It's just not going to happen. It's not enough money to actually buy enough land in Burnside of that size to plant trees. So I'll finish off by saying Frank Kafka was somebody from way back when, who was a bit of a 1960s 1960s, no, he was a rock guru that used to say stuff, and he actually said once, he said this, invest Frank Kafka. Frank Capra, that's the one. I'm getting my philosophers mixed up. There's so many of them in my head all the time. Anyhow, this guy, what's his name? Frank Capra. Frank Zappa. He actually said, buy real estate because they've stopped making it. Let's not give it away. Buy land because they've stopped making it.
All right, Councillor Dawes, your next.
I do remember Frank Zappa, actually. Yeah. But look, to be serious here, I'm with Councillor Davis here. We've got to be pragmatic. Is this land useful? Now, I went down to Spencer Street. I was scared to jump over the fence. I had to ask some questions of administration. How wide is it? 6.3 metres, not 4. So I found that out. And all about the encroachments. But let's just go back to the encroachments. We talked about the encroachment on Matilda Lane. Now, the reason why we agreed to get rid of those encroachments was because there was a right-of-way to the house at the end of the lane. That's the reason why we got rid of those encroachments. We sold land in Dulwich, where Councillor Cornish used to live. A little patch there. Waterfall Gully Road, we didn't really want the land, we got a little bit for that. And I love the open space fund, and we could put money, I don't think it's going to be $1 million, by the way, but we can put money into that to buy land, which would be useful. I'd love to have, and I'm sure Councillor Turnbull will agree with me here, a continuous pathway from Michael Perry Reserve all the way through to Hubby Court, because at the moment we've got to walk down the street in part of that reserve. But this is not next to Second Creek. In fact, no one's ever walked in this land except for the people who actually live there. Now, to Spencer Street, Councillor Jones said we've got to get rid of all those trees. All the trees are at the back of the property. There's no trees in the front of the property. It's an old house that needs to be knocked down. There's no question of that. So I think it would actually add to that street if they did decide to rebuild there. But just making sure, there's a right-of-way halfway down, there's two. We've got a swimming pool and a tennis court, and I forget what number, that's 4 Spencer Street, so they've got to have a right-of-way halfway along. We're not going to get rid of the trees on that particular piece of land either. They will stay, because most of them are regulated trees, or even, in fact, significant trees. So I will be in support. I would have liked, though, that it wasn't rescinded. I would have liked to put that to the side and we got more information, because that is what Councillor Pickett's trying to do, is get more information so we make a considered decision, not one based on emotion. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I've just been thinking in the last couple of minutes about the writer Franz Kafka and his work, The Trial, which is a wonderfully horrid, piece about the depths of bureaucracy. I feel we might be giving that a bit of a nudge with the to's and fro's of the way this is playing out. Look, I was really hoping that we could have laid this rescission motion, which is what we're speaking to now. We're speaking to a rescission motion. I was really hoping we could lay this on the table because I don't... Look, as a rule, and I've said this before, I don't like rescinding unless there's new information. And I think what Councillor Pickett's follow-up motion will give us, it'd be potentially new information that I think would warrant considering a rescission. So at this point, I can't vote to rescind, but I'm looking forward to the debate on the motion without notice, which may be presented to us this evening.
Councillor Cornish.
A question of the administration. After our actual motion or council's decision on this, has the council contacted the residents and what has been the response?
Through Madam Mayor, my understanding is We have not enacted any part of this motion, but I'll stand corrected. Mr. Cant?
Through your worship, as the primary applicant, the owner of 2 Spencer Street was advised of Council's resolution on the 10th of March. While commencing preparation of formal correspondence for the remaining affected owners, we were advised that a rescission motion was proposed, and therefore, consistent with how we normally manage, we ceased all action on the
Can I also just clarify, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not, environment. Given there is a big pipe under there and you'd need access to it, will you be planting trees over the top of that to stop, or will there be just shrubs that you can rip out if you need to?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll refer that question to Mr. Cant.
Through your worship, we have no plans at this stage. This position came to us through the owner of the property. Council considered the decision at the time and made the decision to remove the revocation, move the encroachments, and we have not done any further planning since that time, waiting for Council to consider its next step.
Does anyone else wish to ask a question or make a comment? No, too many comments, asides that are inappropriate. All right, if there is no one else who's wishing to ask a question or make a comment, or join the debate, whatever which way you like to look at it, I will go back to Councillor Piggott.
Could I ask a question before I...
Certainly.
And that is, along the, if this was lost, despite the words "if successful, I will move," will you allow me to run the second motion if the rescission motion is lost?
If the rescission motion is lost, I will allow you to move the motion on notice, without notice.
Okay.
Because of the earliness of the evening.
Oh, okay, no. Even if it was late, it'd be a very good decision, Lady Mayor. So to that point, I mean, there's concerns, and in fact, even I have a concern. I'm not looking to bury this as an option for the next 12 months. So I think the appropriate exercise here is to vote this down, and I will be voting against it, which is a rather unusual situation, but I think that is the appropriate way. It can sit there. I assume there'll be a certain amount of common sense about how far we progress it, but it will, assuming the second motion gets up. So I think the appropriate thing is to vote against it, so please do not support this motion.
I think in 12 years, that's the first time I've ever heard you say it like that, Councillor Piggott. All right, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? All right, the motion is lost. You caused that, Joe.
Keep going through.
Okay, so I'm going to allow grants. All right, Councillor Piggott, you have an alternative now. Councillor Piggott?
Yeah, thank you. Look, my intention always was not to take anything off the table. We might have just done that, but I'm sure we can sort that out down the track. If, with all the information, we come to the same conclusion. But the fact is that we made a decision last time that punish people that have encroachments. There are precedents. Councillor Dawes actually went through a great list of them where it does make sense, albeit that encroachments are not appropriate, but if they're there and does make sense actually to transfer the land and let the residents get on with it, it's a good thing to do. We took the decision last time without some key pieces of information for my mind. We didn't really know what was on that area of land in terms of flora and fauna in any sort of detail. There was certain speculation about how wonderful it might be, and we didn't know what it was worth. And I don't think it's a good look to make a decision around something like this in the complete absence of knowing what it's worth in terms of dollars to the ratepayers. On the night, I think 100,000 got bandied about, flew around. Tonight, $1 million has got bandied about. I don't know which one of those it is, and I don't think we should take a decision based on, Warwick Kappa saying, like, never sell any land, irrespective of what it's worth. We can't be doing that. We do need to have the information, look at the value, and if that value still is balanced out, we shouldn't sell it. All power to us. But we should not do it without that key piece of information. And so I think it's really quite important. The estimated costs for removal of encroachments, that'll be a useful piece of information. It's perhaps not our problem, actually. It's the problem of the residents, and if that was the way we decided to go. So I think it does need to be sorted out. It was brought to us by administration to sort out. And so with the benefit of this information, I think ultimately we will work out the best way to go forward, and depending on timing, we'll go forward. So I seek your support in getting that information on the table so we've got the whole picture.
Seek a seconder. Councillor Davis, you wish to speak?
I agree with that. I'm not sure. I think it's prudent that we at least receive this information, and then if we continue to remove the encroachments, so be it. But at least we have an informed position about what it's worth, whether there are 13 species of extinct or brand new species that are yet to be discovered living on the land, which you never know. But at least that we can have an informed and sensible debate about it, I think is a good step. And then if we proceed to remove the encroachments, then we can do that. I would also like to note that this is very different from Matilda Lane for a number of reasons. And as that issue was, is for some significant different reasons in terms of the players and the different rights associated with parcels of land. So this is a separate issue. So I hope you support this motion to get the further report.
Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, there is a mixture of encroachments here, and the cost of removing those encroachments aren't necessarily all the residents. That's what I've been informed, or Councillor Turnbull and I have been informed, that it depends on whether it's a historical encroachment or whether it's a current encroachment. So that information is what Councillor Pickett is seeking as well. And also, what does council have to pay for if we do decide to maintain this as community land? Well, we pay for all the boundary fencing. That is not a cost to the residents, that's what I've been informed. The legal cost associated with issuing and enforcing notices under the Local Government Act, and work to make the laneway transversable and safe for the community. So there are some extra costs there to maintain this as a community reserve. So those are the sorts of costs that I'd like to know as to whether they are high or low or whatever. So I will be supporting this because more information is going to make us or find a very good decision. It might be the same one that we had before, but I think the seeking of information here will certainly assist us.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I have a question. Could I please be advised what is a historical encroachment, and when does an encroachment become a historical encroachment, please?
Through Madam Mayor, my understanding is one and the same, but I'll stand corrected. Mr. Kent?
Through your worship, it is one and the same in terms of whether there's an encroachment in place there. It comes down to the removal responsibilities that would be determined at the time. So there's a mixture of encroachments that were either built by the existing owners and some that predate the current ownership, and on that basis it's likely that the removal responsibilities would have to be determined on a case-by-case basis. So if we could determine that those who are currently in the properties encroached, it would be their responsibility to pay for that. It gets more complicated if it's pre their purchase that the encroachment occurred.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to the CEO, if I may. Just to potentially put fears to rest, is it not council policy, albeit a very old policy and a policy very rarely used, but is it not council policy that when we sell council-owned parcels of land, certainly significant ones, that the funds be quarantined in our open space fund, i.e. Burnside Village and so forth?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, that's correct.
So any money earned from this would be quarantined for future open space purchases?
Yeah, there are some other people.
It's relatable, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Davies next, and then Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Another question just raised in the debate. Why are these encroachments on McKenna Reserve different to Matilda Lane, please? I've just had the statement made, and up to my mind, an encroachment is an encroachment is an encroachment. So I'd like to know the difference, please.
Through Madam Mayor, that's my understanding. The principle at play here is encroachment on council land. I'm not seeing a differentiation.
Next is Councillor Jones.
Question to the CEO. We sold some land to Burnside Village for $5 million. What new land did we purchase with that $5 million?
So through you, Madam Mayor, Council made a decision to use some of those funds to not purchase land, but to utilise them for our RFID 3-bin system.
Councillor Carbone, you're okay? Okay, now it's Councillor Hubel then.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I've got to be frank, this is a really disappointing outcome and turn of events this evening. We are drifting from issue to issue here. We had a motion passed in March to act on encroachments, and we're now having conversations about selling the land. So not only have we completely flipped on our position based on no new information, we're actually going down an entirely different path. And I'm, to be truthful, quite uncomfortable with the decision and the direction that the Chamber's gone tonight. I think it's really frustrating that the process of removing encroachments is now off the table for 12 months. So regardless of what this report says, if we pass this motion, regardless of what this report tells us, encroachment is off the table until May next year. So we have just eliminated an option. That sends a message that tonight this chamber is choosing to go down the path, and that is what we're doing. We are going down the path of disposing of this land. Rather than reclaiming it, we're heading down that path.
Point of order. That has not been decided.
No, it hasn't.
That is not true.
I'll retract that, Councillor Pickett. Now, I was in favour of getting this more information. And to be fair, I am still in favour of getting this information, and I will vote to get this report. But I think we've eliminated an option, and I just think that's irresponsible. So we should have laid this over. There was a formal motion to lay this on the table, which we should have done, and we should have gotten the information and made a decision based on that. Now, by rescinding, we have made a decision based on information we don't have. And I'm uncomfortable with that. I'm uneasy with that. And I really, don't know what else to say.
The decision's been made by the council, so that's where it stands. Councillor Davey.
Could I clarify, please, what resolve means? What does resolving encroachments mean in comparison with removing all encroachments?
Let's have to do that in summing up.
Well, I'm asking.
Well, they can do that.
No, but I'd like to know what council will, the administration will do if it says resolve all encroachments.
Through you, Madam Mayor, resolve for me means that you resolve the problem. That means it can be dealt with in two different ways. You could sell the land to the encroaching property owners, or you may choose not to sell it. Either step is a resolution. So resolve can mean either step.
All right, Councillor Davis.
In respect of Matilda Lane, was there any recommendation from a state authority stating in that case that they did not wish to isolate a plot of land at the end of it, which that laneway allowed access to, and so it could not; those encroachments couldn't be sold because it would isolate a parcel of land. And would the CEO consider that that might be a material difference from the current set of situations?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, you're correct. There was a nuance around the state government's approach to a subdivision opportunity.
Through your worship, thanks, Chris. Yes, that's correct. The advice we received, we didn't put anything to them officially, because the advice we received that if a application went to them, they would not approve an isolated or landlocked block of land.
Through Madam Mayor, there's two different issues there. Yeah. There was a parcel at the end of the resultant lane, which would have been impacted, but council still could have sold each of those parcels along the lane if a different approach was taken.
Didn't we need to close the road? And to remove that as a public road? Because it was a public access point to that parcel. So we wouldn't have been able to remove it as a public road access.
All right. I'll just get some...
Yeah, I think this is getting... I don't think we need to get into it. All right. All right, Councillor Turnbull, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. I can understand Councillor Hubel's angst. We all don't really want to sell off our land, but we're not going to sell it until we have information. And as Councillor Davis said, informed decision. We need to make an informed decision. We didn't have enough information at the last vote. It was a bit of an emotional vote, really, don't let's sell off our land. But a report will give us information, which is why I'll support this motion.
I have a question, thank you. In relation to the removal of encroachments, We've been just led to believe tonight that it's council's responsibility to remove encroachments. Could I please clarify that? And have we paid for any removal of any encroachments in Matilda Lane, for example?
I'll get the specifics from Mr. Cant. The answer is some of the encroachments council paid to remove and some of the encroachments were paid by the landholder based on the nuance around how the encroachment got there or the structures in the encroachment. But Mr. Cant.
Yeah, through your worship, that's correct. Each individual example comes down to a case-by-case scenario, and quite often it comes down to the negotiated final position. So that when it went through the appropriate legal process, the final negotiated position resulted in council contributing to a couple of those encroachments. I don't have the figures in front of me, though.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I'd like to speak against this motion. Look, I'm hearing this stuff about Matilda Lane and how I voted about because there was this reason and this reason. I voted to get rid of the encroachments on Matilda Lane because they were encroaching on our property. And I'll vote to remove encroachments in McKenna Reserve because they're encroaching on our property. And people who, if they're encroaching in Mount Osmond Reserve, to get them off our property. So that was why I voted. So I'm a bit puzzled about all these people attributing ulterior motivations to me. Look, I'm not going to vote to sell this land. I think it's a really bad idea. It's a slippery slope. We have a finite amount of land. If we sell it, we'll never get it back. Will we buy some replacement land if we sell it? Well, the history suggests that we won't, quite frankly, because we'll find some other hugely valuable thing to spend the money on and it'll just be frittered away. And the land will be gone. And then next time we need some money, we'll say, well, let's sell a bit more community land. And, you know, before I lived in Burnside, I lived in London. London's been around for 2,000 years. There's no reason why Burnside won't be around for 2,000 years and longer. We can't just go around selling bits of community land every time we feel like a bit of money, because otherwise we'll turn into Hong Kong or Manhattan, and that'll be a disaster. Perhaps we can sell Kensington Gardens Reserve next. We'd probably get a shitload of money for that. $100 million. We could say, well, rates holidays for however long, guys. Wouldn't that be a great idea? No, it would be a terrible idea. It's a terrible slippery slope. We should avoid it. And yeah, look, the details of flora and fauna currently existing on the land, I would suggest, is irrelevant because it's been encroached on. So it's not pristine wilderness, but it could be. And it's the potential flora and fauna that can be on the land is critical for me. And frankly, knowing what's on there at the moment, I hope that we will discover some rare wee beasties, as Councillor Lemon hopes, but even if we didn't, I would still value that land because of its potential and what it can be turned into. So I'm going to vote against this motion.
Councillor Davey, question?
Thank you. Yes, I have a follow-up question to, again, about removal of encroachments. Does, with Mr. Cant's response, does our involvement in costing in removing the encroachments depend on whether we've given inadvertently or advertently planning approval for those encroachments to be made? Does that muddy the waters at all in respect to some or all of the encroachments, both in Matilda Lane and McKenna Reserve?
Through Madam Mayor, and Mr. Cant will correct me, my understanding is the decisions we made around council paying or not paying certain removals was not related to any planning permissions that were given. So, no.
Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. I'll speak to this now. Thank you, Councillor Jones. What he said.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question of the administration, whether or not it can be. Obviously, there's a report coming which includes, but Councillor Jones raised something that I thought was quite valuable in terms of what possibly could happen if we were to turn it into a reserve and back. Is it possible for the report to include what it might look like or what we could include on it as a reserve to give equal balance in this report?
Madam Mayor, you'd have to seek your permission or ask the mover his thoughts.
Is that what we're looking for? 2.4? See how I go on the variation, if you like, or unless you've got it in your head, but which includes potential uses of the land remaining in council hands. Yep. Does that work? I'll be happy with that. Who was the seconder? You were. Yeah.
Thank you. I endorse Councillor Jones and Councillor Lemon's comments. But what gets me totally, my greatest concern is resolving all encroachments. I have to say I don't trust this. I mean, it's weasel words to my mind. It isn't, it's either here nor there, it's keeping options open, and it means we can do whatever we want. I actually cannot believe the debate that's happening about the value of this land in economic terms and opportunistic development terms when it's all about the environment, to my way of thinking, for all the reasons that have been outlined. I don't know how anyone could support it.
Right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Because I'd really like to give it back to Councillor Piggott and get this meeting finished. I also allowed everybody to speak and ask lots of questions.
Well, thank you for the debate. I guess it falls to we other 9 to actually make a decision about this based on all the facts specific to this case, given what we've heard. I do think actually, and I might be wrong, in practical terms, I actually feel the 3 people who have spoken in so vigorously about it even being looked at even further, it's probably in their best interest to vote this up as well, because it does actually keep the issue alive. Councillor Hubel, yes, perhaps if after getting this report we decide to do along the lines of the original, we might have to wait until next May. That might be the case. But to be fair, this issue was brought to us by the local resident. It wasn't any drive by administration or any councillors. This land has stood there with a fence at either end of it, at full use of no one in the community for I don't know how many years. So let's not get too precious about how fantastic this land is, and we need to sort it out right now. In terms of the weasel words that are the intention of number 1, actually the Chief Executive eloquently put it. I think it's important to tell these neighbours we're going to sort this out. So at the latest, May next year, we are going to sort this out, and we'll sort it out one of 2 ways. We will do a deal with you and perhaps earn some money that we could do to put to other uses, and you will pay it and you'll keep it and do what you wish to do with it. Or, second, you will remove those encroachments. And that's what number 1 does. It puts them on notice that what's happened in our custodianship that we didn't notice, actually, what's happened with a fence at either end and their encroachments on it, that will not go forward into the future. One or the other thing will happen. So look, I'm asking, I wasn't looking to debate. I wasn't looking to debate this. I don't think, we haven't taken the call. Councillor Hubel was incorrect. We haven't taken off the table, in my view, or in our thinking anyway. We've got a technical issue until May next year. What we are doing is getting the rest of the facts. And then we can look our residents in the eye and say, well, we looked at all that, we got all the information, all the relevant information, and we took a decision. Not one based on, gut feel and just things we believed on, irrespective of what facts we were given about this specific piece of land. So really, I feel it's in our best interest to vote this up.
Those in favour? Those against? Those who voted for, please stand. We have Councillor Cornish, Councillor Piggott, Councillor Davis, Councillor Carbone, Councillor Turnbull, Dawes and Hubel, and against Hughes, Davey, Lemon and Jones. And we didn't have any sudden changes of mind during that one. Right, and the motion was carried. Confidential items, we don't have any. So I declare this meeting over at 9:35.